Okay, that's fine.
All right, so we're going to do this again.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Go
Here
back
we
into
go.
hijack. Start for the third time. Oh, hold on. Ange left the door open. I hear our little iRobot working away out there.
I have to. You look great with your knee. You're walking.
Yeah, it actually works. I'm surprised that it works like a knee does.
I'm damned. All right. Uh, here we go. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the next reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Wall Street is over. Money never sleeps, pal. That's what I got.
Is that it?
Andy, there is, I don't know if you've heard this, there is an ancient forest dwelling community of movie lovers.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, and they've come out of the woods and now they're on the internet. The Woodland internet-based community community of film lovers. The genus species. Yes, and they congregate in a little place I like to call Discordia.
Oh, okay.
They do, but they're just very special. It's a very special tribe. Do you know anything about these people? Have you ever heard of them? The Woodland movie lovers?
I have. I've heard that this particular group loves to chat and communicate. It's very community based. There's a lot of constant togetherness and
yes,
the joy of cinema.
They're all nudists though, so you should know that going in. Just so naked.
Thank God it's all text based.
We are talking, of course, about the Next Reel, member-supported online community. We do a lot of episodes talking about movies every single week, and we sure appreciate the help and support of our paying community members who join, who support the show with some bucks every month, and get early access to all of our shows as we get them edited. They get access to live streams of most of our shows, and not this one today, though, because we broke the internet. So this one's going to be after the fact. But we just appreciate those people who come along and say, I listened to enough Next Reel that I'm gonna help these guys pay for their shoes. And because it really is, this is what we do. We do podcasts, and this is the weirdest job you could possibly have, but it is what it is, and it means a great deal that you've at least considered supporting us to do this, and that you get enough out of it. We've got a lot of stuff coming up. We've got specials. We've got Marvel Movie Minutes coming back. We've got all kinds of things ahead for a great 2021. So if you haven't checked it out, head over to truestory.fm/membership, and you'll be able to see the Next Reels membership program and see what you get and all kinds of good stuff there. Anything I missed?
No. In the immortal words of the people at the Change Bank, it's what we do.
Classic. You bring me a nickel, I'll give you 5 pennies.
That's right.
Okay. Wall Street. Andrew, welcome to Wall Street. Did you ever at any point fancy yourself potentially like a hedge fund manager? Hedgehog manager. Did you ever have any desire to go into the business of the street?
No. Next question.
It's not. You've got nothing else?
It's one of those jobs that I don't think I really knew what it was. And sometimes I still don't really feel like I get it. And I think that's always going to be my wall with this particular career. And I watch movies like this, or, Ewan McGregor had a great one that where it was a true story about, he was a stock trader, and I can't remember what it was called, but when I watch it, everything kind of makes sense. I'm like, okay, I think I understand this world.
Sure,
And
but the
then as soon as
second
I
you have to
step
describe it
away,
to somebody,
I'm like, now what were they doing again?
yeah.
I don't really understand. And I see all those people on the floor and, on the stock floor, and they're all like, buy, sell, buy, sell. And I'm like, okay, so if I call my stockbroker and I just say, hey, I want to sell these stocks, does that mean he calls up somebody and somebody runs down there and go, I've got 20 shares to sell? And I don't fully get it. And so
Hey, buy, sell, eh?
Exactly. I try to
I
imagine I get what's going on here.
Yeah,
And
no, you don't.
just
But especially weird because I think based on what I understand of this, which is I think about as much as you, I think it's very strange that Oliver Stone was able to make a documentary about GameStop before it happened. Isn't this what it exactly what happened? I think this
so
was it.
funny. The only thing that the film is missing is a moment with Margot Robbie in a bubble bath
Yes.
describing the specifics of what's actually happening.
Yeah. Yeah. This is okay, so Wall Street is legendary Oliver Stone, right? Next to Platoon. I don't know. Maybe is this this probably has easier appeal for a lot of people who might just have discovered Oliver Stone through this film and not Platoon. Would you agree?
Yeah, for people not looking at war films, I mean, in a way, it is kind of a war film. You could see it that way, but it's definitely looking at a side of the greedy American culture that kind of really rose in the 80s, and that whole mentality. I mean, it was kind of based on the junk bond and inside trader scandals going on in the 80s, and it has that sensibility about it. And the whole thing with Gordon Gekko's, greed is good diatribe that he has in this film, I think it fits very much with the Reagan era and all of that kind of rose from that. And so, yeah, I think people clicked with the sensibilities that came from this film and the idea of Gordon Gekko as I suppose you could say, almost a representation of the type of people who were in this industry.
You said I agreed, and we're going to come back to that. But you said something a second ago that I think is worthy of further discussion, which is that this, you could argue that this is a war film. Not, I don't mean to take that comment too heavily, but what are the parallels that you see between this and Platoon as sort of vintage Oliver Stone?
I mean, story-wise, that's a good question. But I suppose it's a story about a person who has thrust a new person to an industry or to a particular place, who's trying to find their place, and they're trying to figure out who they are through the context of this role that they're represented by. In the case of Platoon, it was Charlie Sheen as a soldier, a new soldier in Vietnam, and he has two very different leaders who are kind of shaping the way that he sees the Vietnam War and helping him figure out what his place is in that. In the case of this film, I mean, he's not new to the world, but Charlie Sheen's character, he's struggling. He's not really getting anywhere, and it's not until he meets Gordon Gekko, and that starts, shaping his ideas and his perspective about how the game is played and how to get ahead, and he latches onto that. And so I can see a similarity in the type of character where you have a character who's trying to figure out his place in the world and deals with where that takes him over the course of the story.
I actually think I think it actually has some really direct parallels. If you look at you have the two different kinds of leaders that you have, or mentors that you have in Platoon, and here we have Gordon Gekko and Hal Holbrook, right? I mean, representing the classy kind of stock trading for wealth and value, long-term value building, and the shark, the like, I buy and sell to break things up because it can be done. I don't make anything, right? That kind of ideology. And I think this movie is testing the ideology of wealth and capitalism, just the way Platoon is testing the ideology of America's involvement on foreign soil. And those are two things that I think repeatedly come back in Oliver Stone's work, right? Testing ideologies and worldviews through narrative. I think you have a point that, Bud in this case isn't completely green, but I think you could say he is to the kind of world that he's introduced to in this
Yeah.
movie. Like he's on he's a broker on the sales floor, and he hasn't been introduced to the kind of wealth. Arguably, it's an entirely different planet from what he's been doing, even though they're still buying and selling stocks and companies.
Yeah, it's a very different type of approach that he's taking here. It's interesting the way that you describe that, and I had forgotten Hal Holbrook's character, but absolutely the parallels are completely clear with that character and Willem Dafoe's character as kind of
Yeah.
the two more positive potential influences. And it's interesting because if you look at it that way, it's as if in Platoon he ended up siding with Tom Berenger's character, only to realize partway through, oh, you know what? I really need to switch teams. So
Don't you think?
see, yeah, you can see it playing out that way. That's
And
interesting.
and you have to wonder that he cast Charlie Sheen
Yeah.
as that character. Like, we're just gonna have you do the movie again. Like, we're just gonna do it
Right.
again, but you're not in a jungle. It's a different jungle this time.
It is. Yeah, it's still a jungle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing, because I feel like, and we'll see as we wrap up the series. Like, I feel like this kind of ideological dialogue is something that Oliver Stone needs as a filmmaker, right?
Yeah.
I think it's sort of an anchor for his work and for what he's trying to communicate on film.
I think that's a big part of Oliver Stone, and I think starting with Platoon, and I'd say starting with Midnight Express, which we didn't discuss in this series, but it's really kind of right beforehand. But that really is where I think Oliver Stone was figuring out, I like this type of storytelling where there's an ideology that I'm focusing on, and we've
Yeah.
seen bits and pieces of his ideology throughout some of these other films, and he has talked about how it's there. It's just these directors didn't necessarily latch on to kind of like these liberal ideas that he had in them. And I think Salvador certainly had more of them, even if it wasn't as successful a film. But starting with Platoon, that's really where he is able to start putting his ideologies out there and kind of spelling things out a little more. And while that film still was very autobiographical about his time in Vietnam, it was less focused on kind of the politics specifically, more focused on kind of the people who were there. When you get with this film, this is where it really starts shaping his ideas and saying and seeing his worldview about things, and he's really starting to push his perspective on things that aren't necessarily as personal.
Right. These are the movies that define his generation.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so how do you want to say? I'm tempted to talk about Charlie, but maybe we should hold off on Charlie for a minute.
Yeah, before we talk about Charlie, here, let me just make a clean entrance there.
Yeah.
So before we jump into kind of more of the people and everything involved, I have a question for you, because I noticed this throughout the film. Specifically, he starts the film off with a montage of New York, like the people and the places waking up. It's kind of like the sunrise is coming up and we see the fish markets, some homeless people, we see people going to work, and then we kind of slowly are moving into the city, and it's the subway. Meanwhile, Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon is playing, and it felt very much like over the course of the film we see shots of the city and all that, and it feels like Stone is reminding us that intrinsically this is a New York story. It takes place in the city. Does that matter, do you think? Does pointing out the fact so much throughout the film that the Wall Street is right here in New York City, does it need that? Does it help in any way? What are your thoughts?
Well, I guess the question back to you is, can you make this movie anywhere else?
Well, you can't, but you don't necessarily need to point out so overtly throughout that, hey, look at the people on the fish market, look at all these little parts of the city that are waking up. Like, all of that stuff doesn't necessarily tie specifically into the story, but Oliver Stone chooses to use it. And so does that matter? I guess I don't know if we needed all of that, other than just kind of setting things up.
I don't know. I think we do. I think we do because I think this is not just a story about business and Wall Street and a thing that can only happen on Wall Street, right? I mean, at least in the 80s, it was this and Tokyo and London, right? I mean, those were the big three. And now I think there are big stock exchanges and lots of other places. I'm not aware of them, but I just feel like so much of what this movie is trying to say is locked pretty firmly in New York culture, right? In just what it means to be a New Yorker, and what it means to, get the suits that you get in New York, to get like it is what it is because of New York, and so much of it is just him, Stone, really getting interested in the kinds of people who work here, right? On just figuring out, like, actually coming into contact with these gecko like businessmen in New York and have all the houses and trade all the time and never sleep, right? It's just, this is what it is. It becomes like this is a reflection of these people that he was coming in contact with as he was making other movies prior. And I think it really is so much of what he's trying to do is say that this is an identity that can't be separated from its location. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I suppose so. And I mean, we do hear, Bud, Charlie Sheen's character, talking a lot about where he's going to live, where he lives now, what he's trying to do. He talks to the realtor. There's plenty of restaurants that we
Oh, Upper
kind of
East Side, West
go
Side,
visit.
like, yeah.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I think that there is something about that, because even in context of the city, and parts of the city that become so prevalent to what your identity is seen as, then of course you have the people who live outside the city, and when he goes off to the beach houses and stuff like that. And
Right,
so I
right.
think that there is something about the city that I think, by nature of it being a film about Wall Street, it does lend itself to it. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought it was interesting that he focuses on so many things in his montage that weren't specifically Wall Street, that were much more specifically New York. But yeah,
Have you have
I
you
think it
spent
does
much
fit.
time in New York City?
I've never been.
You've never been.
Nope, I never.
Oh, no, yeah, you should fix that. I mean, not right now.
So okay, I gotta go. Sorry.
I sang in college, right? I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
that.
I
This
do.
is when I was going to school in New Jersey. We used to go into New York City and sing on Wall Street, and for tips, like outside the bars. And at the end of the day, we were singing this song, um, um, called "Forbidden Angel," and it's a song about it's like a couple singing to one another about their how bad they feel that they're having an affair because of their spouses that are at home wondering where they are. And we sang it, and this guy walks out of this bar, the stockbroker. He's in his suit, he's full kind of, end of the day, he's kind of loosened his tie but not too much, and he comes out and he gives us a tip, $100, and he sniffles and starts crying and walks away.
But
End of story.
yeah,
That's my New York Wall Street story. That's all I got. Is crying brokers. That's what I bring to the table.
sounds
Uh,
about right. Sounds about right.
so it uses the camera in fun ways, though. You gotta admit, like the way he jumps into Wall Street, kind of introducing us to the frenzy by way of frenzied camera. What'd you think?
Oh, it was all over the place. I loved it. Like the jib moves, the dolly moves, just really fast in and out of Charlie's face or other people's faces, or different things like whip pans along the little stock ticker in the room. Sometimes there were like crash zooms when the market would open. It got to a point where he was doing split screens, and that's where, of course, Stone's cameo pops up. It was really fun. It was so alive, and which was very different than when we were spending time with Bud and his dad, which was much more grounded and real. When we were in the stock market, it was like a feeding frenzy, which I think that he and his co-writer talk about. And Stone said he was making a movie about sharks, about feeding frenzies. Bob Richardson, the DP, and I wanted the camera to become a predator. There's no let up until you get to the fixed world of Charlie's father, where the stationary camera gives you a sense of immutable values. And I thought that
Yeah.
was very apparent, and I really enjoyed the life that it brought to the story.
I think so too. I think it is an animated way into the film. Like it really, I mean, it gets you excited. Like there's this visceral kind of piece that comes with it that um, I think just makes it allows us into this world without feeling like we have to know everything about the world that's going on. Right? We
Yeah,
know we're going into a machine.
exactly, exactly.
All right, bud.
Sheen, do you want to talk about Little Charlie?
I want to talk about little Charlie.
Uh,
I had he how do I say this delicately? Had Charlie started deteriorating already? Like between Platoon and this movie, had he started deteriorating? I don't think the deterioration started until after this, but now that I know where he ended up, uh, I feel like there are hints of it here.
which is funny because his character isn't like isn't using drugs or anything like that.
No.
He's fairly normal, but yes, he is obsessed. He has his obsession about money and more and bigger and better, and it's definitely apparent with him.
What did you think though of his performance?
Uh, I thought it was fine. I didn't really have issues with his performance per se. I thought it worked in context of the story. He seems to grow a little more greedy and kind of fall in with Gecko as it goes, and I liked that transformation. I had issues with how he was written periodically and how the script kind of took shortcuts with some things, like when he had his moment of kind of that "who am I" sort of moment, and moments toward the end where the script just kind of sped through some of these things, and I was like, wait, when did all of a sudden he start feeling this way? It took me by surprise. I don't know if Sheen could have played it any differently to improve it. I felt really like they were script problems. I didn't have specific issues with him. Did you?
Yeah, I did. But I want to get to your point because I think you're exactly right. I think the movie cheats. The script cheats because I think Stone knows that we know that this is kind of a Pilgrim's Progress story and he's going to redeem himself at the end of the movie and kind of get to the other side. I mean, Stone has said as much. Like we know the archetype, and so the script gets away with cheating us into to knowing how he's feeling, even though he never demonstrates it. Like I think that's an astute observation. My challenge is, and it becomes most apparent for me when I'm watching Martin and Charlie on screen at the same time. And Martin Sheen, who is extraordinary craftsman, right, on screen. He is an extraordinary performer. And he is exhibiting the kind of like both sort of patriarchal stoicism and deep grief and anger. And he's doing it all with the slightest of motions and looks and steely gazes and twitches of facial muscles that are just the work of a real artist. And Charlie, in response, is acting with his forehead. Like he's doing this thing where he's like nodding every time he gets mad. He's nodding his head and boom, da bing bang, Dad, you never knew me. Oh, head, head, head. And it feels like he's like one of those like birds, the water bird desk accessories. Like he's just like nodding. And I realize this guy is not up to this movie. He's not up to anybody else's craft in this movie. Not a single person on here couldn't act circles around this guy. And we give him a lot of leeway because he did the same role pretty well in Platoon.
Well, he also never in Platoon went down Tom Berenger's path.
Right. That's true. I
So
just feel like even early on when he's trying to be super like genuine and like authentic and bring, Blue Star Airlines into the fold and everything's going to be great. Trust me. I know this guy. He still just isn't able to keep up with anybody else on screen with him. I swear, McGinley is like the comedic like moment in this movie, and his is a more authentic performance than anything Sheen gives us in this movie. And I'm not saying like I hate it as a result. I'm just saying he was outclassed. And here is the money quote from Oliver Stone when asked about Sheen's performance. I don't think, well, the whole thing is Charlie, to me, when I did Platoon, was a wonderful potential movie star. He didn't have those kinds of ordinary movie star looks, but he had a certain quality that came from Martin, honesty of expression. We played with it in Platoon and also Wall Street. But by the time Wall Street was ending as a film, Charlie was definitely more interested in money, and being in the Wall Street world certainly sharpened his appetites. So after that, it seemed to me that he was on a path to make big money because he wasn't paid a lot for the two movies with me. Do you think that drew him away from exploring his talent? I think Charlie never developed his intellect that much. I mean, he had great instincts, but growing up as a child of an actor, you fall into these patterns. So you can act, but you don't think about why. And sometimes I feel Charlie was ignoring those principles and was just insensitive to himself. Andy, that is exactly descriptive of my experience with Charlie Sheen. I felt like he was just saying the words and emoting what felt like the right thing to emote because his instincts are good, but he had no idea why he was doing anything on screen at any given moment.
I certainly think there's something to that. I think it's being a little harsh on him because weirdly, I think because the persona that Charlie Sheen kind of puts off anyway, I actually buy a lot of him because he already carries this kind of sleazier persona about him, this slick, maybe sleazy is the wrong word, but slick, know-it-all sort of persona. And so I end up buying so much of it. But you're right. There are those moments where he's exhibiting his anger or he's thinking about things internally. Those are the moments that I have a harder time connecting with him. So I
Absolutely.
agree. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hold
yeah.
your thought. I
All
gotta
right.
let this cat in. I'm not gonna hold you. Don't come over here. Why are you coming to me? Okay, go ahead.
So
Absolutely, you said.
absolutely. I feel like those and then you get to Gecko. And Gecko, who is, I think, beautifully softened, right? Because they make him early on, they make him a fan of the arts and culture, and they put him on a beach staring at the sunrise, talking about just wistfully how beautiful it is. And I've never seen a painting that can capture the kind of majesty that is, my Hamptons sunrise. Even though as the movie transforms, you realize that it turns out he's exactly as duplicitous as you think he's going to be, and he's just a terrible person, and he's greedy, and greed is good, and blah blah blah. They make him multidimensional, right? Insofar as this film, exists to demonstrate some pretty black and white ideology. They do. I think Stone does a noble job making Gecko a multi-dimensional personality, and to have him standing at these parties talking about all the great stuff and the cigars and all the things that he appreciates, and then have Sheen just staring at him like a derp dope, like he just has he's just no recognition of any of the stuff that's going on screen. I think it makes for an interesting fish out of water story that ultimately needs a little bit more of a little bit more strength.
That's pretty funny. What you said about Gecko, it actually made me think that the way that he's written in those moments is a little bit like Burt Lancaster's character in Local Hero.
Okay.
Do you remember that one where he's
Yeah.
he's kind of that really quirky, weird boss who has those moments on the beach and is just all he about the comet or whatever. He's just such a weird, quirky, rich guy, and Gecko is totally written that way until he becomes like this duplicitous businessman, which I think is pretty funny.
Yes, it's absolutely true, and I think Burt Lancaster might have been an interesting casting choice for this movie.
He was actually Oliver Stone was trying to get him into this film. He actually because films like Sweet Smell of Success were such influences for him when he was putting this film together, he was actually working with Burt Lancaster, trying to get him in a bit part role somewhere in the film. It just never ended up working out schedule-wise, but I couldn't
That would have
help
been
but think
interesting.
that would have been fantastic. Okay,
Yeah.
so I have so I want to run some other casting ideas by you and see what you think.
Oh, are we
Marlon-
gonna do our armchair recast game here?
Well, these are people who had been in talks in one
Okay.
way or another. So Tom Cruise, he really wanted the role of Bud Fox. What do you
Yeah.
think of Tom Cruise instead of Charlie Sheen?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You? I
This
mean,
would-
tell me you don't
This would
agree.
have been the era of Rain Man. Rain Man came out a year later. So yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
And I think it
he
would have been
great.
perfect because this would have been a spiritual sequel to Risky Business.
And his going up against Gordon Gekko would have been a spiritual prequel to A Few Good Men.
Oh my God, you're so right.
That would have been great. Okay,
Yeah.
Michael Douglas as Gordon Gekko. Apparently,
This is going to be hard for me to imagine anybody else. I think Douglas
know.
does a pretty
I-
bang up job here.
I completely agree. Apparently, Oliver Stone's first two choices were Richard Gere and Warren Beatty. I have a really hard time with those two.
Yeah, I don't see either one of them.
Yeah. James Woods apparently was offered the part, but turned it down to act in the film Cop, which I never saw.
That was a mistake.
Well, I'm glad he did because I don't
Yeah.
see him in the role either.
Yeah, no.
What about Al
100%.
Pacino?
As Gecko?
Yeah.
Yes. You know why? Because we've seen it. He was in Ocean's 13. Right? Whatever you
Love-
think of Ocean's 13, Pacino can handle that kind of role. I can see him
Yes.
doing it.
Oh, totally. I
Yeah.
totally see that too. And last but not least, William Peterson.
Oh, William Peterson. No, he's too soft.
I think there could be an edge with him, though. I think there could be an interesting edge. I think Al Pacino of the bunch is the one that I would say works the best, but I think William Peterson could do something interesting with it.
Okay. Maybe. I feel like maybe I need to go watch some Peterson again. But I think he's a little bit soft around the edges to pull that off.
Interesting.
He's a little too he's got no sharp edges. Peterson.
Well, Michael Douglas, he was looking for something a little edgier, a little darker. I mean, this is the same year he actually was doing Fatal Attraction. In fact, he was doing Fatal Attraction the same time he was doing this film. And the scheduling, to avoid scheduling conflicts, he was jumping back and forth over the course of any given week between these two films, which I think is crazy. I can't imagine
Wow.
how complicated that is for an actor to kind of in your headspace to go from one character to the other.
One character like this to the character in that, I think those are very different characters. I mean, it's not like the Fatal Attraction. He wasn't like a broker by day, right? Wasn't he like I can't even remember what he did. Was he like a psychiatrist or something?
I just don't remember.
Yeah. Been a long time.
That's really interesting though. And you can, now that I think about it though, I'm like, okay, he did have the same haircut in
Yeah,
that film.
That's right.
So that makes sense. He was doing stuff like Romancing the Stone and wanted something a little darker and edgier. And so I think it's funny when you see that, this year he was doing this and Fatal Attraction. I think he succeeded on both counts.
Yeah, I do too. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Always liked that guy, Michael.
Yeah. Oh, I think he's great. He'd be an interesting person to do a series
Yep.
focusing on even just like stuff that he produced or something. I think he's another really interesting person in the world of film.
Totally agree.
I guess he was a fan of the script, but he said he had never seen a script with so many monologues that would be just like one block going down like 3 pages of one person speaking, a lot of which was him. And so
Yeah.
he actually had to work with a speech instructor to get better breath control because the dialogue was just so rapid fire and the monologues were so long. And at the time he made this, he was smoking 40 cigarettes a day.
What?
What is that?
Wow.
Like 2 packs? Is that a 2-pack?
I don't know. I've never had a
I can't remember. I don't know
pack
how many
habit.
cigarettes.
Like, yeah, that's not even what is it? 3 by, is it 18?
I don't know.
No,
how
it's
many,
3.
I
It's
don't know.
it's got to be. Maybe it's.
I thought it
are
was 2
there-
by 10, but maybe it's.
How many cigarettes in a pack? We are.
Digging for the important stuff, folks.
Yeah, 20. There are 20.
Okay. Yeah. So 2
20
packs.
cigarettes in a pack. Huh.
And then he modeled his performance after his friend Pat Riley, who is the head coach of the LA Lakers at the time.
Oh, okay. I guess I could see that.
Yeah.
I didn't
But what's
follow the
interesting
Lakers.
is that Stanley Weiser, who co-wrote the script with Stone, I think they met in film school. He said that when he was writing some of Gecko's dialogue, he was actually patterning it after Oliver Stone himself, who actually spoke this way, which I think is very funny.
That's awesome. What do you think of some of those big monologues, like the stuff that Gecko has really made iconic?
I mean, the big one, of course, is the one when he's at the annual stockholder meeting, and that is the one that he says greed is good and all this sort of stuff, and has a lot of interesting comments in his speeches. I think Michael Douglas delivers it in a way that makes him very. It's easy to get sucked into what he's saying and to buy into it, because it's like, yeah, this is great. He's got a lot of personality, and he exhibits that charm that makes me want to just kind of go along with him, right? And I think that's what he is doing so well when he's having these moments in the script. And I just think Michael Douglas carries that off. A lot of it is his persona, but I think he brings a lot to the role, just the way he's performing it.
Well, and it's really smart writing too, because what he has done is in the course of that speech, he's the comes in as the evildoer, but he makes the company leadership out to be worse. And that pivot that he does in that particular speech is quite artful.
Yeah.
Quite artful drafting.
I also think it's really funny that this is another perfect example of lines that are remembered for being said in a different way. We've already talked about a couple of these films. We had Casablanca with the "Play It Again, Sam" line, which is never said. And then,
Yeah.
of course, there's "We Don't Need No Stinking Badges," which is never said in whatever film that is. I'm totally blanking right now. What is that film? Why did I totally blank on it?
It's not. It's the one that Blazing Saddles lampoons.
Yeah, it's Bogey.
Was it Sierra Madre?
And "We Don't Need No Stinking Badges" in the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which is never said. Greed is good. That isn't actually said. He says greed, for lack of a better word, is good. I think that's funny how people remember things these ways.
Yeah, it's because what is the actual badges line in Bogey in Sierra Madre?
It's like, "We don't need no badges. We don't,
Yeah.
I can't remember the actual line now, but
Yeah. Okay. It's not like we don't need no. I mean, what you would normally call stinking badges.
no, he
Right.
says badges. No, this is what he says. So he says, "Badges. We ain't got no badges. We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badges."
Okay. Yeah, that's funny. That's really funny.
So it's very much paraphrased in kind of all three cases.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Shorthand.
Yep.
Okay. Who else do we have? Oh, how about Daryl Hannah?
Oh, I feel like we should pair Daryl Hannah and Sean Young together, because one, they're both replicants. Two, I think that it's funny that Sean Young, we've always heard crazy stories about Sean Young and the stuff she does to try getting roles, the way that she behaves, all this sort of stuff. In this film, she was not showing up on time. She was ill prepared. She was, just very rude. Like, Charlie Sheen had a huge issue with her. They just were butting heads all the time. There was supposed to be an affair scene that had been written in the script, but they hated each other so much that Oliver Stone took it out because he didn't even think he could probably shoot it. And Sean Young thought she should be playing Darian because she thought she would be a much better Darian, and she thought that Daryl Hannah should just be fired, which I think is hilarious. And Oliver Stone, because Sean Young was so difficult, he actually diminished her role greatly over the course of the production. Honestly, though, I think Sean Young would have made a better Darian, because I think Daryl Hannah is terrible in the role of Darian, and apparently she does too. And Oliver Stone seems to blame himself for casting her, and then also for not directing her as well as he could. He says that Daryl Hannah needs a very I can't remember the specific words, but a very good director, somebody who knows how to handle and get out of her exactly what they need. And she just never could understand this character. She was at odds with everything this character represented, and just had a hard time. And it's rough watching her in this role.
Yeah, it is rough. It felt like she just didn't want to be there. Like I didn't even get a
Yeah.
sense that she was interested in being in this movie. That was
Right.
probably the hardest, most heartbreaking part. And I don't understand it. Like it's not a terrible movie to be associated with. You know what I mean? Like you're kind of living the dream in a movie like this. Like just be friends.
Yeah, right. Yeah, make it work.
Anyway, it was rough. It was rough watching. It becomes a whole storyline that is ridiculous. I'm just ready to move on every time it's on screen. And can we talk for a minute about that ridiculous design job she does on his apartment?
I couldn't help but think that these design things, like when you see these in a movie, that they're just doing what they can to like push it into like whatever is the most ultra chic, instantly passe after like a week, right? Nobody's gonna
Mhm.
be interested in that style, and that's
It's exactly what it
she
felt like.
does. And
Yeah.
it's just like, yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, it's terrible. Even I actually love the little moment where she introduces him to the smiling faces, the painting on his entry hall, and it's and he has no idea what to do with it, and she's just telling him, you'll love it, you'll love
Yeah,
it,
right.
you'll love it because others will love you for loving it.
Exactly.
And I think that's so much part of what Stone is trying to demonstrate with this movie about like wealth and greed and acquisition. This is a movie about the value of acquisition for acquisition's sake to humanity. And his apartment is a shining, horrible beacon for why that's a terrible thing.
It becomes a very much a representation of the point that is brought up in the story at some point when somebody is like, how many boats do you need, or something like that. Because it's like that's what happens with this mentality is it's like once you have $100,000 from a deal, what does it matter if you get another $10,000 out of it? But they want that, and they want more, and they constantly want more, and it's always about more, and it's it's interesting. And so
yeah. I I think yeah, never mind. I don't want to make that point. Okay.
Should we talk a little bit more? I just want to kind of a couple more points about Martin Sheen. I know we were already talking about how much we love him in the movie and how great it is seeing Martin Sheen actually playing Charlie's father in the movie. I thought that was really fun to see. I guess Charlie Sheen, it sounds like Oliver Stone kind of gave him the option of, hey, do you want to have Jack Lemmon play your dad or your dad play your dad? And he picked his dad, which I think is very sweet.
Yeah, that's cute.
And I just love that. I did think this was funny, though. Martin Sheen actually worked with Kirk Douglas in the movie The Final Countdown in 1980. And now, in this particular film, their sons are working opposite each other. And also, Martin Sheen had actually already worked with Michael Douglas in an episode of The Streets of San Francisco. And they worked together in The American President. So there's a lot of cross between all these different Sheens and Douglases.
Practically one family, man. Don't even ask.
Pretty much.
I did like him, and I liked the whole sort of union thing. I think he did a great job. That scene, the showdown in the awful apartment, where he laughs and walks out, and they have their little exchange on the street. That's the scene that really lingers with me because Martin Sheen's so good. He doesn't have a huge role in this movie, but man, is he good!
Yeah, he works really well in this particular role.
Any other cast you want to just run through that you were excited to see? I got one, and I think you have the same one.
Well, I mean, it was a cast of a lot of great faces that we saw here. John C. McGinley, Terrence Stamp.
Wait. Let's just do the one that you're most excited about at the same time. Okay?
Okay.
Are you ready?
Let me think who that is. Okay.
1, 2, 3. Richard Dysart.
James Karen. Oh, Richard Dysart. Sure, yes.
You're just picking names, man.
No, it's just James Karen because I worked on a movie with him, so it was nice to see him.
Oh, okay. All right.
But yes, Richard Dysart, because of our Richard Dysart
Because
series.
of our Richard Dysart series. And because we talked to him
That's right.
on the floor.
That was so great.
Yeah, I
A
thought he
small
was
scene, but
great.
yeah, he was great.
He was great. Small scene, but it was nice to watch him get chewed out. I think Hal Holbrook was a treat to watching this. Terrence Stamp as Sir Larry was great. Love that they used him to sort of buy the company out from under Gecko. I think it was a great twist. McGinley was super funny. I just everything about him I think is great. And once again, like it becomes more clear every time I see McGinley that it's his identity and not necessarily tropes from but or that his identity is that he collects tropes from past movies and works them into future characters. and and they work great. They work great. He's a
Funny.
collector. Yeah.
That is funny. You didn't mention when you mentioned Hal Holbrook, but that character is kind of written on and based on Stone's own father, who had worked as a broker, as a stockbroker back in the way long ago, in the 20s or something, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least the 50s.
No, here you go. Yeah, inspired by his father, Lou Stone, who was a broker during the Great Depression at Hayden Stone.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when they went to make this movie, realized how different the world was of this. Because actually, this wasn't even the movie that they were hoping to make. He and Stanley were actually, what I found interesting, they were trying to make a movie about the 50s quiz show scandals, which eventually Robert Redford would make with Quiz Show. But in the process of this, they started or they looking into Wall Street. They realized just how much it had changed, and they said, "Oh, this would be great to actually do a story about this world." And so,
I think the his relationship with his dad is clearly everywhere in this movie, and when he's talking about how his dad left him $19,000 on his deathbed and said kiddo, I got you a start and a college education, but I don't have a lot of money left to give you. I had fun spending it. I had a great life. I kind of feel like that's, if only we have that to give. Wall Street, Stone says, was a really personal movie. It was disguised biography.
yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah, another example. I mean, because he had literally just done this with Platoon.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll have to see what we can find biographically in talk radio when we do that next.
Right. Right.
I only wanted to bring up one other performer. I mean, I enjoy all the faces that we see in here. James Spader, Saul Rubinek, a lot of different people that we've seen in other projects that pop up here. But the one I wanted to bring up was Sylvia Miles, who is an Oscar nominee. She's a fairly big supporting kind of character player. She plays the realtor, who we find out in the sequel that her name is Dolores. And that was what I wanted to bring up, is that she is, I think, maybe other than Michael Douglas, the only actor who is reprising their role in the sequel.
That's interesting. I had forgotten actually that she was,
which is the funny part.
Yeah, I know. I'd forgotten that she was that it was played by the same character. Or the same actress.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Very funny. Interestingly, this was a script that there was a lot of concern by people on Wall Street that it was going to be kind of a one-sided attack on that world, and Stone actually had a few people on board to kind of be technical advisors, and they actually
wait a minute before you finish that sentence. It was a one-sided attack on that world, right? Like, we agree.
No. Look at
This
Hal
is
Holbrook's
definitely
character. This is why Hal Holbrook's character is the way he is. This is very specifically because of this letter that he had from these advisors. They wrote a critique of the film and brought up all the different points, one of which was that all of the characters, it was unrealistic because all of them were morally bankrupt. Hal Holbrook's character eventually also takes a deal, and they said you have to show that there are some people who aren't bad, that it's not a completely corrupt industry, and that's why his character was the way he was.
I'm just saying, like, if you step back on this movie and you look at what Hal Holbrook represented to you in this movie, what is it?
The huh. I I don't know what I'm not sure why.
To me, he was the dinosaur, right? He was the thing everybody had moved beyond. I didn't feel like he was this bastion of integrity because there was only one of him, right? Everybody else was out for the hustle. And to me, like the entire firm was out there not representing Holbrook's values as his character's values, but trying to undermine them.
Well, yes and no. We also, I mean, not everybody is doing what Bud does. Not everybody is going to jail by the end of the film. Not
Okay,
everybody is corrupted.
but I guess that's not that wouldn't be the question. The question is, would everybody have been corrupted had they been presented the same deal?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. And, to a large extent, you might be right. But I do think that at least it helps, maybe is the way to phrase it, by having Hal Holbrook's character be the way he is. It's not
Yeah.
completely one-sided. It's not an attack, which is certainly something that Oliver Stone would be, said to be doing with other films, where some of his films were pointed out as being much more one-sided
Yeah.
than this film is necessarily. Although that's interesting because this is something that is brought up, that Michael Douglas has brought up, and I think this is the sort of thing that comes up with these films, like when a filmmaker makes a film like this, or Martin Scorsese makes The Wolf of Wall Street, and people say, "Oh, you know what? I joined up with Wall Street after I saw your character." Like Michael Douglas says, he still has people who come to him and will say when they saw Wall Street, when they saw the movie and saw Gordon Gekko, they went to Wall Street and got a job. And he said that makes him sad because he was supposed to be the bad guy, but people look at him as the one that is the draw, not Bud Fox, not the person who sides in the end with what's right. And it does have kind of this anti-greed message over the course of the film, but it's seen as a representation of greed. And I think that's what some of these films sometimes struggle with, because the wrong people latch on to those big characters and they say, "Oh, Gordon Gekko, he's so cool. I want to be just like him."
Yeah, that's that's gross. It's like you mistook the protagonist. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
exactly.
that wasn't the right guy.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
trappings. Yeah,
Yep,
that's
yeah.
hard to watch. Who else? Anybody else excite you? You want to, or you want to talk about the location?
Yeah, let's just going through the crew. Robert Richardson, I think, does a great job with the camera. A very kind of orange brown look through a lot of the city throughout the film. I thought that the tone really kind of captured kind of that. I don't know. It was a feel that worked really well in context of the story.
Well, it does, because it works across all of their different shooting locations, right? When they're shooting in the Hamptons, when they're shooting those sunrises, you get a lot of those deep oranges. But as soon as you go into some of the, like the trading floors, the offices, they're like Gecko's office is antique, right? It's lots of wood. It's beautiful. It's like that. It's rich with modern trappings. And I think that they picked a really nice tonal family.
Yeah, no, it looks great. Really works nicely.
And okay, can we talk about Stuart Copeland?
Well, yeah, music. Stuart Copeland did the music. It's a film that I think I focused more on the songs that played. There were a lot of like Talking Heads, different things that played throughout the film that sometimes they fit. Sometimes I was like, "Oh, this is an interesting choice." The score itself, I don't think much of. What did you think of it?
Well, I'm a big Stuart Copeland fan, which is weird, especially because a lot of his scores in the 80s were, kind of could fall very quickly into the things that I don't like about scores of the 80s. But there was, I just think this one, I like it. It was one of his earlier things, right? Like he was still very much policey, or maybe was he already out of the police? But there was this, and then he did The Equalizer, and The Equalizer is the theme that really sticks with me, and I think defines a lot of what he's doing here. and like you can get a sense that he's figuring out, oh, this is how you do scores, and then he ends up with a hell of a career of some amazing scores.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, I really
I don't
like it.
know. I don't know if I'd say amazing scores. Certainly a lot of scores, but like looking through the list of films that Stewart has scored over the years, we'll see how he does with talk radio when we're talking about
Yeah,
that next week. But I mean, I look through his list of films and I'm like, geez, I
yeah,
mean,
you're
I
right.
just
Amazing
don't
is too
remember.
generous.
I'd say robust,
Yeah,
but I don't see anything that I go, oh wow, that really is great. I mean, Central Station, actually, I really love that film. I can't remember the score, but I just don't know if I have much
I
to say about what he does music
I think
wise.
what I can say is that much of my opinion of Stuart Copeland as a composer for film is defined by my memories of Stuart Copeland as an instrumentalist with the Police, and
Sure.
that is like I'll absolutely admit to that. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly has been busier in the video game world more
Yep.
recently than the film world. So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, what's I don't know. I guess for me, sad is that Jerry Goldsmith, one of my 10 J's of composing, just I absolutely love Jerry Goldsmith, scored the film originally. Oliver Stone was unhappy with the music, fired him, and brought Stewart on instead. I don't know if Jerry Goldsmith's music has ever been released. I'd love to hear what it sounded
Wow.
like.
Wow.
Yeah,
But you're right about the soundtrack. There are some songs that are iconic of the era too.
yeah. A lot
Talking
of
Heads, David
just
Byrne.
the Talking Head stuff
Yeah.
is what really sticks out for me.
Yeah.
And his wife was actually in the film, which I didn't even know until I was doing some research. But his wife was, she played Bud's secretary. She was Adele Lutz. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Do you have any facts and tidbits that we need to fact or tidbit?
You know, I do have a couple. One, I always have to bring this up when it comes up, when I have the opportunity. Charlie Sheen, he does work really well in movies like Hot Shots and Hot Shots Part 2, which I really enjoyed. I thought those were very funny movies. And in Hot Shots Part 2, he is on a river, and there's a scene that is made to look like he's having an apocalypse now sort of a moment. He and his team are on a riverboat going through the jungle, and they pass through the fog. They pass Willard on his boat from Apocalypse Now, and the two boats kind of pass each other, and the two characters stand up and look at each other, and they both say, "I loved you in Wall Street." Oh, I just never got sick of that moment. It's so
Yeah,
good.
it's a good moment.
So
It's a
fun.
good bit. But more
The
importantly, Andy, tell me about the lizard.
it's not a lizard, Pete. It's a gecko.
Whatever, man.
It's the Cyrtodactylus gordongeckoi. It's a species of gecko that was actually named after Gordon Gekko, and I just think that is just amazing. That here we have an actual gecko that is essentially named the Gordon gecko. It lives over. It looks like it's in somewhere around the Philippines, somewhere in that area. It's a small island in Indonesia, is where it is.
I love how they screw up the spelling because of Gordon Gecko, right? Because Gecko is spelled Gordon Gecko is Gekko, but you don't spell gecko that way. It's CKO.
That's correct.
And
That
so
is
in
correct.
the name of the gecko, they actually spell gecko wrong. Gordon Geckoi. Gekkoi.
That's
That's
it's the joy of these Latin
yeah.
names that people get to come up with. So yeah,
All right. So we talked a little bit. We know that there is a sequel slash remake. What else? What else do we need to
there
talk
was
about?
the sequel was Wall Street Money Never Sleeps, which, as you pointed out earlier, is an actual line in this film,
Mm-hmm.
and the focus on that, of course, is Gordon Gekko now that he's out of prison, and the financial world is totally much different than what he dealt with. This, interestingly, I suppose, I don't know, is the only sequel that is in anything that Oliver Stone has ever made. I don't know if it just speaks to the types of stories he's drawn to, but there is that. And I don't know if this certainly doesn't count as a sequel, but I think in context of what I was saying earlier about these people who are drawn to Gordon Gekko as kind of an idol type of character, I thought it's very much kind of a spiritual sequel. There's a film that came out in 2000 called Boiler Room that, the characters in that film, it's very much the same sort of world where you have these characters who are, talking around trying to make a lot of money. And Ben Affleck's in it, Giovanni Ribisi, Vin Diesel's in it. But these people worship Gordon Gekko. Like, they watch that scene when he's saying greed is good, and it's like their mantra. And so I definitely think that it's worth checking out if you're a fan of this movie or these types of characters.
There's that part where Giovanni Ribisi is putting all of his money on that one mining company that's trying to find unobtainium. It's a real nail biter. Okay, How to Do It award season.
Not too bad. 10 wins, 5 other nominations. What's interesting is that of the 10 wins, 9 of those went to Michael Douglas for his performance in the film, speaking to how much his performance here really stuck in society at this particular time. He won at the Oscars, Best Leading Actor. And what's interesting is Oliver Stone he said that over at 20th Century Fox, which released the film, they weren't so enthusiastic about the film. They thought it was going to be a hard one to push for awards consideration. And so instead, they focused all their attention on broadcast news, on all their kind of pushes for awards and everything. Broadcast news went on to get 7 nominations. This film only got the 1 nomination. And then broadcast news went on to not win any Oscars. And this film did win its 1 Oscar. So there you go.
There you go.
Like I said, Michael Douglas, he won 8 other awards, one of which was the Golden Globes. And the only loss that he had of the nominations he received was at the New York Film Critics Circle Awards, and he lost to Jack Nicholson. This is one of those weird ones for Ironweed, The Witches of Eastwick, and broadcast news. Again, 3 versus 1, I guess. The only other win that the film had was at the Razzies for Worst Supporting Actress, Daryl Hannah.
Well, that checks out.
It does.
I don't love the Razzies.
The Razzies, but
yeah, but I get how that happened. All right.
Yeah.
And Andy, the box office.
Well, finally getting some budgets over $10 million. Stone had a budget of $16.5 for this film, or $37.1 million in today's dollars. This movie opened December 11th, 1987, opposite Throw Mama from the Train, Empire of the Sun, and Cold Steel. This landed in 3rd place and stayed in the top 10 for 8 weeks, barring 1 week where it slipped just below. It did go on to earn $43.8 million, or $98.6 million in today's dollars, giving an adjusted profit per finished minute of $492,000. And, of course, it has a lasting legacy.
Yeah, lasting legacy. It has Gordon Gekko. God, bummer. All right, Andy. Well, I think it's probably time for us to take it to the mat.
Ooh, let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've ever talked about on this fair show. If you swipe over in your show notes, you tap the word Flickchart, it'll take you straight to this movie in the Flickchart database where you can add it to your own list and see how it stacks up to ours.
First up, Wall Street or La Cage aux Folles?
I think you're going to say Wall Street.
I am.
I am too.
Wall Street or Platoon?
Wall Street. No. Platoon.
Oh,
I don't know what I don't know what I said there. That was
Charlie Sheen. Yeah, I'll say Platoon as well.
All right.
Wall Street or Interstellar?
Interstellar.
Interstellar. Wall Street or The Town?
The Town.
That hasn't popped up in forever. Yeah, The Town. Wall Street or M?
M.
M. Wall Street or Life of the Party?
Life of the Party.
Life of the Party. Wall Street or the Russia House?
I would say the Russia House.
I will say Wall Street.
I'll give it to you.
Okay. Wall Street or Creep Show?
All of Creep Show?
All of Creep Show is perfect. What are you saying?
I'll give you Creep Show. I'll give you Creep Show.
Wall Street or The Bank Job?
The Bank Job.
I'll say The Bank Job. Well, that lands Wall Street. I'll tell you in a minute. Come on. Oh, come on. You're doing so good, Flickchart. You're doing so good.
Oh, Flickchart. What are you doing? It's funny, all the ads are loading just fine.
Yeah, the ads are great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that lands Wall Street in spot 245 on our chart. 245 out of 498 films, Pete. 498. That puts it at a 51%.
51%. All right. Well, that's right smack dab in the middle, Andy. So there you go. I'm vamping just a smidge because I didn't do my Flickchart ranking of this movie. So I'm going to do that. All right. Well, that's pretty good. Right in the middle. It's higher on mine. I'm kind of puzzled. It ended up at definitely higher than I would give it based on my star rating. How'd it do for you?
It did okay. It landed in spot 1985 out of 4576, which is a 57%.
Yeah, see, mine was 335 out of 1491. Andy, that's a 78%.
Wow.
I have some re-ranking to do, like some spite ranking.
I mean, it's not a bad film.
It's really not a bad film. Yeah. I just had a markedly better time with Platoon, and I know I'm a bit of an outlier there. It sounds like based on the 1-star reviews we read last week. But I had a much better time. I expected my memory to be well served by this movie. It was not. I remembered going into it. I remembered the movie much better. I just had more problems, more performative problems with this movie, not as an Oliver Stone film, maybe as a casted film in some key roles that kind of dragged the whole thing down for me. So, if I'm going by the algorithm at letterboxd.com/thenextreel, Flickchart says this should be a 4-star movie. I'm thinking I'm landing right around 3 stars.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I am. 3 stars and a heart. I mean, I enjoy the film. I think it's good. But yeah, it's one of those ones where, I mean, I actually think I could easily return to it. I don't think I have too many problems with it. I don't know how often I'll return to it though. But
you know what? I'll bet. Check me on this. I'll bet it's a movie that we'd like much better if we weren't doing a podcast about it.
That's entirely possible.
There's so much about
hard.
Yeah, like there's so much about this movie that I'm watching more closely than I would if I were watching it just, to watch it or to introduce somebody else to it.
Sure.
All right. So so we're done with Wall Street. We're done with, I think, the big two, and we're cruising into what now?
Next up is a film that I remember coming out. I never saw it, and I'm curious to kind of jump into this world, because I think it's an interesting story. It is Talk Radio, which Oliver Stone did in 1988.
Okay, I look forward to it. When's the last time you watched it?
As I just said, I've never seen it before.
I wasn't listening because I got a text that distracted me and reminded me I have something to do. I didn't turn on Do Not Disturb. I look forward to it. It's going to be a good show when the movie ends.
Our conversation begins.
Sorry.
That's okay.
That was really funny.
That happened in the film where Carrie was texting you. Like I went through this whole long thing about this issue I had, and then you came back and you said something that was like totally like I could totally tell. I'm like, he didn't hear a single word I just
Not a single word. I just feel like clients are texting me. That is the peril of middle of the day podcasting, is what that is.
Absolutely.
But that was good. I just told you I've never seen it.
Oh, too funny.
Okay.
Too funny.
And how are those Letterboxd reviews?
I'm going to look super low.
I think I'm going to start with the popular reviews sorted by star.
I'm going to do Film Vixen's half-star review.
Film Vixen.
Yeah. Although Maya's is pretty funny.
Oh, I'm I'm looking at reviews for talk radio.
Oh, jeez. Some people are so weird. Like, wanted to like this, but thanks. I hated it. It's like,
Why are you
thanks?
writing a review on that?
Why thanks in there? I don't know. Anyway.
Sort.
Anyway. Dee-dee-dee-dee. Wall Street.
Wow. Half star from Sha Wu Jing. A half star. Decent enough film. Little too simplistic and obvious with its messages. That's a regular Andy Nelson quibbles.
That's funny. And that'd be a 5-star film. But you have it
Right.
backward.
I do. I have.
Every time.
I like Jake Moltz. Oh my God. Who the fuck cares? 1 star.
Right? Oh, too funny.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Ben Reyes. That's a very long.
All I could think about at the beginning of this movie was Hudson Hawk. Thanks a lot. Oh, and we didn't even talk about this, and we don't have to, but I just like couldn't. I'm like, is this some like male filmmaker thing that they think all women like sleep topless? It's like I just watched this other movie, and it's like every single woman in it, when they're in bed, they're topless, and I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know any woman who's ever slept topless. It's like it's such a silly masculine like filmmaking view of putting these stories out there, and it just
Yeah.
drove me nuts with that. Ugh. Anyway.
Oh my
there's my
God.
rant.
Okay,
That
I'm
one?
doing this.
Okay.
I got it. Letterboxd giveth, Andy.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
There's some good ones. There are some
There
good
are.
ones and some long ones in this fair catalog. But we went low.
We did go low.
I went
Straight
to
to
one
the
and a
bottom.
half, but I think you went even lower than me.
I did. I
Why
went
don't
to the
you-
half stars. I have
Yeah.
a half star by Film Vixen, who said this movie was an hour shorter than The Wolf of Wall Street, and this felt 4 hours long.
I get it. I get it. And you know, we didn't talk about any comparisons to the spiritual sequel Wolf of Wall Street, but it's interesting because Oliver Stone talks about it in some of his like reflections on his dad's experience and then his experience in the 80s, and then oh my God, I like it that at one point he says, I don't even think there are clients on Wall Street anymore, versus his grandfather who always supported the client, or his dad who always supports the client. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
I went to Christina, who gave it a 1.5 star movie, and I love this. My mom made me watch this, and all I have to say is that Charlie Sheen reminded me of Ben Shapiro. Good night. Oh, thanks, Letterboxd.
Did we need to say anything about letterbox.com/thenextreel or thenextreel.com/letterboxd? I mean,
Oh, do you want to?
I don't know. Should we?
Very end? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so ha 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 ha. Thanks, Christina. Now you.
You know what's great about Letterboxd is that they have let me say, and don't forget, if you're a fan of Letterboxd, you can go to thenextreel.com/letterboxd and you can get a 20% discount on your pro or patron membership. Check it out.
Thanks, Letterboxd.
All right.
Nice.
Good. I got to jump into my other meeting.
Okay.